Welcome in episode 332 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very excited to be joined once again by the one and only Sean Smith of Go Big Blue Country. Sean, how the heck are you?
I am doing better. I'm doing good. We have a staff. We're starting to see some development with the roster. And told somebody today, Jack, it's been 2 weeks since John Calipari left the program. Feels like it's been 2 months with all the whirlwind that this thing has been. So we're finally starting to get some movement and some stability with what this thing can look like. And I think that's a big step in the right direction for all of this, because now we can kind of have some clarity on what it could look like.
It really is crazy just to think where we were 2 weeks ago, talking about what we were talking about, what we were prioritizing, draft decisions, and just the trajectory of the program, what that looked like. And to think that our lives would be flipped upside down the way that they have been. We're finally starting to catch our breath a little bit and start to get a grasp of what this looks like, what Pope's vision is, how he constructs rosters, knowing that, okay, he's not just recruiting BYU talent. This isn't going to be BYU East. How he's looking at building his coaching staff out, and some of the early names that he's hit in the transfer portal. We've talked about that pretty extensively. About this was always, fans wanted names. They wanted the full 13-man roster last week when we talked, and it was like, understand that this is a brand new ball game for Mark Pope. This is him understanding that, hey, I know that fans are a little restless. I know there's some anxiety built up. I know it's gonna be a little uncomfortable for a minute, but just take a deep breath and let me work through some of these initial hurdles. Let's kind of lock some foundational things in place, and then we'll be smooth sailing from there. It's very clear what his idea of that was, and that was nailing down a coaching staff. That how quickly it moved to solidify the names that he has solidified, got them hired. Now, 3 names officially hired by the university, announced by the University of Kentucky, plus another unofficially announced today. There's now only 1 name left that we even have to worry about moving forward. The core group of that recruiting core officially set now. They're in a really, really solid spot, Sean, where you can now, they've hit on some early names. Colin Chandler was the first, locking in Travis Perry again after meeting with him and getting that lined up, and then getting Amari Williams on campus, one of the best bigs in the portal out of Drexel, getting him on campus, letting kind of just showing him the ropes, but also it's a cool little experience for Mark Pope too, getting his first guy on campus, seeing what that looks like. Okay, here's what my Kentucky pitch looks like. It's a little, he was his own guinea pig for the, learning what it takes to be a recruiter at the University of Kentucky. So he's been kind of feeling out this process. And I feel this point forward, Sean, is where we're going to start getting real movement in terms of roster, the foundation pieces set. We've already gotten several, and I think things are going to start moving even 10 times speed from this point forward.
Yeah, and this is a different thing, and I know for the last 15 years it's been a restart every single year, but there have been some familiar things about it. Like, you had a couple of names in place. Mostly staff was always kind of what it was, or you'd have some players that you knew. You had an incoming recruiting class that you had got to know for probably 4 or 5 months and got to watch their games. You watched them at the McDonald's All-American game, so you had some familiarity with who was coming in. This is an entirely different situation. Every single face — almost had my light fall on me like it usually does, so that would have been funny. Every single face that has walked into this program outside of Travis Perry is going to be something new. It's going to be a name. Instead of having to get to familiarize yourself with maybe 4 or 5 names, it's become probably 15 to 20 names, and that's coaching staff all the way down to transfer portal targets to incoming freshmen. And it's been a lot. And the job that Pope has done in a short amount of time to not only put a staff together, but a deep and talented staff, and pulling some names from programs where they were established, that says a lot about the vision that he's selling at Kentucky. But now that that is in place and there's boots on the ground, that's when you see all the roster stuff start to stick and pick up. And I think that's what you're going to get here over the coming days and weeks. And you'll start to put a roster together that you can kind of identify with and see what Kentucky's going to look like already with what they've got. Like, already addressed a significant need in size and defense and rim running. Physicality is something that I'm starting to see popping up too with some of these guys. Like, that's been something that's missing the last few years, Jack, outside of Oscar, was just that physical presence to the roster. And I think that Pope is trying to address that as well with skill set, with shooting. The way he done things offensively, you're still going to see, but he's able to go after a different pool of players here. It's going to be hard to kind of follow and envision it until we actually see what the final puzzle looks like. But it's exciting to kind of look at some of these names and see that Kentucky is going to be significantly older.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the staff first because, like we said, you can't really build out your roster until you have guys to help you build it out. Again, it can't be a one-man show with Mark Pope just making every single phone call. I know he's, I've been told that he's a guy that wakes up crack of dawn and is all gas, no breaks until the minute he goes to sleep. He's crushing it in his own individual state, but he can't do all of this by himself. It took, he needed to build out initially to help with the phone calls, help with the FaceTimes and the, handshakes and shoulder rubs and like the politicky side of this. He needed some help with all that. You start with Cody Feger, who we talked about on the last show. You missed that. We had Matt Sack on. He was an absolute blast. Very, very excellent job on his part. Appreciate him coming on. But Cody Feger has been the kind of offensive brains behind a lot of what has worked in Provo with Mark Pope. They are in stride with one another, hand in hand. Everything that they do, they work off of each other just tremendously. That was a done deal. That was a guarantee. Mark Pope wasn't coming to Kentucky without Cody Feger. Those two were inseparable. That was the guarantee. From there, it was about nailing out, okay, if there is one criticism or one concern about what Mark Pope's ceiling was going to be in Lexington and just how successful he could be, is all in on recruiting. He has recruited to a very specific brand, a very specific culture, a very religion. The way he has recruited over the last 5 years at BYU, he can't do foundationally maybe, but the specifics are such a night and day difference in Lexington, especially with brand and platform and resources and fandom and overwhelming all-in support, national exposure, all of those things. It's going to be a whole different beast. He had to get a little creative there and figure out what that looked like and who can help me find the names, evaluate that talent and say, that's Kentucky talent. Like, we know what our BYU system looks like, but who is going to help us create a similar system here with Kentucky level talent? So he goes out and gets Jason Hart of the G League Ignite. The G League Ignite failed this past season because the way they transitioned into a G League schedule, but recruited the best of the best at the high school level. It was teenagers going against true grown men. Like, think of the struggles that this past Kentucky roster dealt with, where the physicality and, the just experience, they just didn't have it. Imagine that times 10, because you're going against 35-year-olds that are trying to make, the G League schedule. You're going against guys that are on their last legs in the NBA, trying, fighting like hell to for one last shot in the league. You're recruiting 16, 17, 18-year-olds to go against that. And it just didn't work, especially with the portal and NIL and the way there are different avenues now where you can recruit talent to college using money that wasn't available before. That was why the NBA, funded the G League the way it did and wanted Ignite to be so successful. The reason why it started crumbling a little bit is because they kind of overshot their hand a little bit, and that opportunity was already there in place in college. You didn't necessarily need that platform anymore. So that leaves guys like Jason Hart, who recruited the best of the best, the 5-star names, the top level talent. Scoot Henderson was a top 3 draft pick a year ago. He got those dudes, but just the recipe wasn't working with Ignite. So you go and get him, an amazing recruiter, knows how to get the best of the best, who had done it at USC, was the right-hand man under Andy Enfield. Really excellent job. At the peak of USC's success, he was kind of the guy leading the charge there. You go get that guy you say your one job here is to go get dudes. Go help us get Kentucky level guys. And you sign him, and he's already hit the ground running on making phone calls and being that guy. He's been a tremendous early hire. Then you go make a move on Mark Fox, who on the surface you look at that and go, well, Mark Fox is, Georgia, pretty average at Georgia, was pretty successful in Nevada before that, but then goes to Cal, really struggles when Louisville was at its all-time low with 4 wins. They were somehow even worse with 3 wins. So on the surface, it's not a sexy hire, but when you dig below the surface and say, okay, he's being hired in an off-court role as a non-recruiter, we are going to maximize his basketball mind. He's coming from Georgetown, where he worked with NIL and kind of player development and stuff. He's going to be essentially the Bruiser Flint role of this upcoming staff, where Pope is going to be leaning on him for just basketball expertise. Hey, what you are best at, we want to maximize this. He's not going to be asked to recruit. He's not going to be hosting official visitors. The recruiting struggles that he had as a head coach, he's never going to have to deal with any of that stuff. But the best version of him, and the reason why he built Georgia basketball, again, at a football school, building Georgia basketball into a program that didn't die, a program that stayed afloat and treaded water and made a couple NCAA tournaments, got that guy to be your number 4 in Lexington. That's a really, really bang up hire on Mark Pope's side. And then you push all of your chips in on your associate head coach. You weren't able to get Scott Drew as the head coach, but to go down to Waco and take the guy that helped get Scott Drew his dudes in the last several years, helped lead Baylor to a national championship in 2021, you go get that guy. You bring him in, you pay him handsomely, and you say, you're going to be the dude to help us get guys. Got VJ Edgecombe, got Jacoby Walter, got Keontae George. Go down the list. The best guys that Baylor has ever gotten in that program's history, Alvin Brooks III his name is on those guys. So to build out your 3-man recruiting class with basketball mind in Cody Feger, all-in recruiters in Jason Hart and Alvin Brooks III, I truly don't know how you could handpick a better staff for what Mark Pope is looking for in year one. For my money, I think this staff is by far one of the best in college basketball. I think it's better than the staff that we just saw leave Lexington by a pretty significant margin. The last staff under John Calipari had some pretty severe flaws. They got complacent. They got a little lackadaisical. You now have 3 hungry, young, up-and-coming guys with something to prove in Lexington. I don't think you could swing I don't think you could hit an outside the park home run deeper than what Mark Pope has been able to do with this 3-man recruiting class.
Yeah, it's a great staff. And that was the most important piece to the puzzle to kind of get the ball rolling is we're going to dive into a roster here over the coming weeks and in the next month. And we're going to talk about whether or not they have enough shooting and they have enough ball handling, they have enough defensive presence and all those things. But to really start the momentum of your program, it had to be a quality staff. And I think there's a lot of differences on it. Like you've got the recruiters, you've got the veteran in Fox who has SEC experience playing against Kentucky experience. He knows this, this fan base and what it's about. But the thing that's across the board with this staff is the grit and the fire and how hard they've had to work to get to where they are. I don't think that's going to go away just because they're at Kentucky, because this is a staff that still feels like they have a lot to prove. But these are proven guys that have done it on the trail. You get national championship experience in Brooks, who has been there and helped build a program. Because look, Baylor, When we were going through the process of whether or not Scott Drew was going to be the head coach of Kentucky, we went all the way through his tenure, and we talked about the beginning, we talked about the middle, we've talked about where it's at. Where it's at has been the best version of the Baylor program, and he's been there for that for a long time. So the best years of Baylor, he was a key contributor and a piece to that. You go and get that and bring it here with Pope, that's a massive win around college basketball. That's probably one of the biggest wins of the offseason, honestly, for college basketball staff or player roster wise. Huge swing, and you knock it out of the park. But overall, I love the staff. I love the direction. I love the Fox hire. I really do. Like, I think it makes a ton of sense when you look at the role and what it's going to be. And this, to me, is Mark Pope saying, I don't want to let anything slip through the cracks here. I want to make sure everything's covered. I want to make sure that we've got the basketball expertise. I want to make sure we got the guys on the recruiting trail, the guys that have done it and won in different roles at different programs that have been established. You also bring a guy that you're familiar with, that you've worked with, that's been kind of your right-hand man. He's done an excellent job piecing this thing together in a matter of a week and a half. And now you really get to start rolling in recruiting, building those relationships, getting guys on campus, doing visits. And now we'll start to look and see a roster in place. And that's a pretty big deal how quickly this has come together, because it wasn't easy.
It's pretty funny because when you talk to people in the basketball world that know the ins and outs of how guys get put in different places and the overall landscape of college basketball, when the dream hires for Mark Pope were discussed about, assistants, who would be the right fit here? Okay, well, Cody Figure's obvious, obvious, but you got to go get some dogs. You got to get some sharks that are going to get stuff done on the recruiting trail. What does that look like? Are you going to go to, people throughout Jay Lucas? Are you going to go get Orlando Antigua back? Are you going to try to get Kenny Payne? Are you going to go for a retread elsewhere? Or, get a guy, maybe a failed head coach at the college level that's looking for his next shot? Like, what does that look like? How does it get pieced together? And Alvin Brooks III, his name came up, but when it came up, it was always that's a guy that you say no, like you got to go at least give it a shot, but it's probably a little far-fetched. He's got it really, he's got it made in Waco. He has got some family stuff going on with, he's very outspoken about his kids and, them needing certain resources, and they've had it made in Waco. They've gone above and beyond to kind of make sure that he's comfortable, the family's comfortable down there. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for him to actually make that move. But his name came up as okay, well, here's what the ceiling looks like. Here's a guy that you do whatever it takes, offer him double what he's making in Baylor, and just let's see what happens. And then he tells you yes. And you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting to get this far, but cool, pack your bags. I'll meet you at the airport. Let's do this. Like, that's kind of where things are. When you talk to people in the basketball world about this hire, they say you could not get any better. This was the ceiling hire that can really change the trajectory. I know everybody wants to know about VJ Edgecombe. Is he going to bring the entire Baylor roster? It's not going to work that way. But I've already heard little whispers of, okay, well, this guy maybe already committed to another school, guys that have already kind of made previous decisions or whatever, that liked Baylor but wanted something a little bit more platform wise, newfound interest in the Kentucky program, knowing that Brooks is going to be the main shark there with the excitement of, the BYU offense coming, Mark Pope, how energetic and exciting, wanting to kind of get the rebirth of Kentucky basketball. People are wanting to be a part of this. So it's in the early stages. There's nothing finalized in terms of big flips elsewhere, things like that. But there are some whispers even starting that Alvin Brooks III is a guy that moves the needle on some of these decisions. And that's really exciting. You want to be in those conversations. I'll be honest, I didn't know what the recruiting landscape looked like with Mark Pope. We talked about, like, you can't recruit to BYU. You got to recruit to Kentucky. But what does that look like under Mark Pope? Does that mean top 10 talent? Or does that mean you go sign the 68th player in high school basketball because he's a diamond in the rough and develop him over 4 years. Is that his version of recruiting? What does that look like? By going and getting Alvin Brooks III, by going and getting Jason Hart, that's Kentucky signing up for top 10 McDonald's All-American talent, but making it Pope fit, making it Pope's system and building around, including guys that fit the system, but the best of the best in their respective classes. This is not going to be about, they're going to add Travis Perry level talents that you develop over time, ranked a little bit lower. That's a guarantee. Colin Chandler, they're going to be living in that 30 to 60 spot. But when there are top 10 talents available, you bring on Brooks and Jason Hart to go get that talent. You don't bring them on if that's not that's what their job is going to be. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited, and that changed my mind about what the ceiling looked like for recruiting. That you're going to continue. Kentucky's going to continue getting 5-star McDonald's All-American talent.
Yeah, for sure. And to me, what it looks like now and what this roster is going to look like here in a few weeks is not necessarily what the rosters are going to look like in year 2, year 3, year 4, because right now it's just a different dynamic. You're literally looking all over the transfer portal, and it's still open. We have another week here until it officially closes and things, and there'll be some names go in, some names pull out of the NBA draft and things like that over the coming days. But what this thing's going to look like, you're not really going to get a feel for what that philosophy is until you start moving throughout the spring and summer and they start targeting guys in future classes. And then you'll kind of find that balance of what they're wanting to do in high school, what they're wanting to do with, like you said, if there's a guy between 30 and 60, or if it's a Travis Perry type player, a guy that they're going to develop long-term, but also in the transfer portal. This is a total overhaul of evaluation just to put a roster together. And you're going out and you're identifying talent, not just the most talent, but the talent that fits what you're wanting to do and build a system in Lexington. Like this system that you saw at BYU, you're going to see some similarities to it, but I think there's going to be some areas that they'll address, especially on the defensive end of the floor where they're wanting to get better under Mark Pope. You're going to start meeting some of those things. They're already doing it. I mean, and getting Amari Williams and stuff. So that's a step in the right direction for the defensive end of the floor. But going after conference players of the year, going after guys that have been defensive player of the year, getting those veterans in your program, that's how you win immediately right now. And that's priority number one. Put the best roster on the floor at Kentucky in year 1. And then you kind of look at it and you're going to take the next 2 or 3 months and get into summer and Peach Jam and the recruiting, and then start kind of maybe establishing those roots of what you want your core to be at recruiting moving forward. So it's exciting, Jack, because I think that the last 2 weeks have probably been a breath of fresh air because it's all new to us. You're new faces walking into Lexington, a new system, a new trajectory for the program, but the same goals. The goals have never changed in Lexington. It's win national championships, it's go to Final Fours and those things, but we're just going to take a little bit different approach than what we've seen the last 15 years. And it's a little uncomfortable because you didn't know who the staff was going to be. You didn't have any idea who the hell was going to be on the roster, but there's growth here. And I'm really starting to like what I'm seeing because getting this staff together was a massive selling point to this fan base. He won the press conference. He's won the last 10 days too, because this staff is among the best in the SEC and among the best in college basketball. It's got young guys. It's got veterans. It's got people that have proven and done it. Now let's see what type of talent they bring in here, and especially like, the visitors and stuff that are going to be on campus and guys that we probably weren't familiar with at all a couple of months ago. But when you dive into numbers and look at them, they've had a ton of success around college basketball, Jack, and they're proven. And that's what has been missing is proven guys entering this program. And I think that's a big deal, and they're going to have a lot of that.
So in terms of what that looks like, so now you do have the staff finalized. There's not going to be a rush to add that 5th guy because he's not a recruiting, not a recruiting coach. You can wait and see what opens up and kind of what the right fit is. You probably want a defensive mind. You want to, add a player developer, something like that. You got recruiting taken care of. You have offensive philosophy. You got the X's and O's. Probably want to focus on experience, maybe a defensive guy, but that can come in the coming weeks, month, 2 months. There's no real rush to round things out immediately, because the fruits of their labor won't be found until summer and that point forward into the preseason. So now it is time for the roster. You got Colin Chandler's the first guy, fringe McDonald's All-American, was overseas for 2 years for his mission trip. That was one that, kind of proved that Mark Pope has some recruiting chops and he's going to bring in some high-level talent, a BYU signee. You got him flipped, now incoming 4-star freshman, but he's going to be inexperienced, 21 years old coming into his freshman year. That's an unbelievable get. Mark Pope singled him out as a superstar talent, high school, young, up-and-coming talent. Then you, again, re-up with Travis Perry. You felt good about that. He wanted to hear from you. You kind of crossed some T's and dotted some I's there, made him feel comfortable. You get him to lock down his commitment. That's a huge one. That's going to be one that pays off, even if it's not immediately. I think he's going to play a lot his first year, but that's going to be more, down the road. And he's going to be a foundational piece of this roster for a long time. And then you go get Amari Williams, one of the best shot blockers, one of the best rim runners, really, really impressive passer, touch, understands, a high level basketball guy with instincts. He fits, the Ali Khalifa guy that was at BYU that, I personally love, because he was a Mark Pope offense fit. He not the most athletic, pretty slow footed, can't really shoot, not a super, serious interior presence, but he had a very specific role that he carved out in that offense, and it helps for some continuity. Well, you got a bigger, better, more athletic, actual pro level talent to fill that same spot that he can pass. He has the touch and instincts and all that stuff. That's kind of the complementary upgrade there. You host Richie Saunders for a visit where he's kind of 6th, 7th man of the year potential, where he comes in and, he's a spark plug, finishes really, really well around the basket, catch and shoot 3-point specialist. He's kind of that level talent. All indications after he left the visit was done deal for Kentucky. He's telling people that it's Kentucky, people around the Kentucky program feeling confident. Still some concern, like why he hasn't gone public with that quite yet. I wouldn't say concern, but more like, does he have something more to think about? Like, did he just, whatever. But, I still think all indications say that he's probably going to be the next up to commit. And that's a really impressive core foundation piece, even if he's coming off the bench. You feel good about that one. You have a host of incoming visitors coming. You have Aiden Mahaney at St. Mary's. He's seen as one of the top portal guys in this current transfer class. And you have Great Osabor at Utah State, who, if you look at Foose at BYU, kind of the same anchoring post presence, that you get him the ball and he goes to work. That's what Foose did at BYU under Mark Pope. And if you're able to close on him, and there's a lot of internal confidence that he is going to be a complementary piece to Amari Williams. And, they're both from the UK, and there's kind of that, English complementariness there that UK definitely likes, and they know each other, share the same agent. There's a lot of connections there. There's some optimism that those two want to play together, and he has a visit scheduled. Kentucky gets the first one to start next week. If you can start kind of piecing together the guys that you get on campus, close with them, then you can kind of push all your chips in on a superstar point guard, a guy that maybe, again, when there's a 7-day window, the portal closes on May 1st for everybody. The exception is guys like Jackson Robinson. When your head coach leaves, there's a 30-day window. So that would put a guy like Jackson Robinson May 11th-ish for when he would have to put his name in the portal. But we're in that window where within a month, everybody that is going to be available is going to be in the portal. So it opens the door for, okay, well, we got 4 or 5 core guys that I want to play with, which is what we talked about last week. You got to just kind of get the ball rolling and the first dominoes to fall. And then people want to play with you. And it becomes well, damn, this is a product that I want to be a part of. Go get your superstar point guard. Go get the guy that was a fringe draft pick that, I'm just not where I want to be stock wise. Let's come back and try to get it a little bit more NIL money, but really prove that I got the, guts with a bigger platform to be a pro. Go land one of those kind of home run hitters. You've put yourself in a position where you have a nice little core group that you can start figuring out fit. And, guys, Richie Saunders, great Osabor, Javon Small, Andre Stojakovic, TJ Bamba, Andrew Carr, Kobe Brea, Aiden Mahaney, like you have a core group of guys that you can say, okay, is this fit better than this guy? We're in a good spot with all of them. Now, who fits best with what we're already having coming in, Sean? And that's where you want to be with a full coaching staff, a full recruiting staff. Now you can start going for the close on the guys that you really, really like. And I think those conversations are still being finalized. I still think that's kind of a moving target with different guys that, it's going to be a process even still from this point forward to figure out who they like to pair with, a great Osabor if you can get him committed, and vice versa. And it's still going to be a little bit of a moving target, Sean.
Yeah, it is. And the more pieces you get here over the next week, then you can kind of have an identity for your roster. Like right now, I think they have what their vision is, and maybe it's one or two different directions, but you're hoping it all kind of comes together. But it all depends on like what you bring in and who you get. And then you can kind of key on like, all right, now we've got 5 or 6 guys. We can kind of start to see the way we're going to maybe be on the defensive end of the floor. We can see some things we're going to do offensively. But I still like that the first veteran, piece or experience piece added to the roster is Amari Williams. And I like that it's a defensive presence, because we've talked a ton about Pope, and we've talked a ton about Pope's offensive philosophy, and we've watched videos. We've broke down the offense, the playing in space, the things that they do. But adding a proven guy that has done it on the defensive end of the floor, I think was a massive step in the right direction for putting this thing together. And you got a defensive anchor there. But just because it's a defensive first mentality type guy, the skill set and the way that Kentucky is going to play offensively, Jack, I'm not worried about adding guys like him or great, Osabor and things like that, like a physical bodies to the roster, just because I trust what Mark Pope has done offensively, and the way that they play guys in space, and the way that their bigs can pass and things like that, the way that they're going to shoot threes. All of it's going to come together. The system's going to make it all fit. But adding physical defensive guys to this roster and veteran pieces, I think, is probably the most important thing to being good right away. And I think Kentucky is certainly trying to do that. They've already got it, and they're going after some guys as well. And I think that's probably the most exciting thing about this to me, is I know I'm going to have some confidence in Kentucky being tough. And I've missed that the last couple of years, because I think Kentucky's lacked toughness that they're not going to lack when this roster finally does come together.
So in terms of how things are being built right now, you have Amari, you have Travis, you have Colin Chandler. If you are able to close out on great Osabor, and there is some optimism that, he has 3 other visits scheduled, but there's optimism that he never sees those other visits, that he leaves Kentucky committed, signed, and, that's your anchor. Those are your 2, anchors. And I love that neither guy is, it kind of reminds me of when we had the conversations of, could Oscar Tshiebwe and Kofi Coburn play together? You remember when we went through that whole debate of, well, you have 2, high touch, guys that demand touches and are, kind of just these larger than life presences on the floor. How can you manage them together in the same time? Well, it helps that they're both, Amari Williams, if there is a downside to him, it's conditioning, foul trouble, that there's a reason why he averaged 24 minutes a game last year. Same with great Osabor. You can have them stagger off one another. You're not bringing them both in to play 40 minutes side by side as the 4 and 5. You bring them in to kind of piece with other guys on the floor. And, again, as we saw, is with the absolute Russian roulette of a front court that we saw this past season, with just pick a day and, pick a name out of a hat of who's going to start at the 5 and how many minutes they're going to have. You have Aaron Bradshaw playing 35 minutes one day and then 6 the next. There was never a rhyme or reason to anything. You can at least develop that foundation with getting those 2. Then you push all your chips in on an Andrew Carr, on an Andrei Stojakovic. You go get a guy that you can trust as a, I think Kay Tyson is somebody that Kentucky was super in on initially, and things are ramping up with UNC. That definitely appears to be off the table as of today. But that kind of archetype, go get your stretch for a guy that you can put alongside either Great or Amari as your stretch for, and add court spacers. That's what you're looking for with that. But when you do that, Jackson Robinson's a guy that Kentucky feels very confident will pull his name out of the NBA draft and will ultimately end up at Kentucky. Do you feel good about him as a 14, one of your leading scorers at the wing? But at that guard spot, Sean, do you like the setup of let's get all of the other foundational pieces set, the front court set, the wing set, and then let's go get the best of the best guard that remains available? Or do they have it backward? Do you get your point guard first and then build around them? How do you like the way they're operating with that?
I like the way that they're operating, and like I said, I like that the interior is being addressed right off the bat. And because I think that when you look at college basketball and you look at things, there's so many good guards that are out there that can make shots and can do things for you. And Kentucky's targeting some of those guys, but the interior, to me, and that's why I'm making such a big deal about Amari Williams. Like, we know that what Pope has done has showed up analytically and in metrics on the offensive end of the floor. It's always been the defensive end of the floor in KenPom that has been on the other direction. We said this a couple of weeks ago. You're going to get naturally better because you're going to get better players at Kentucky than what you got at BYU. That's a given. Like that's always going to be a fact when you coach at Kentucky. So you're going to get better there. You're going to have athletes, and you're going to be doing some things differently. You can go after a different pool of players. You're not kind of handcuffed to do things a certain way here. So I think that getting your interior in place establishes a physicality to your roster. Getting older alone does that to some extent, but you're getting proven guys that are physical, big bodies, a lot of weight on them. That to me is so important. And you're kind of putting that anchor there and establishing it. And now you start building your backcourt around it, and you start getting your shooting, and you start getting the other things that are going to kind of be the identity of how you want to play. But getting a strong physical presence of an identity, to me, on the interior is really important to establishing what you want to do to be good right away at Kentucky. And we know this fan base, when it starts playing games, are you winning? That's going to be the determining thing. And I think to do that for Kentucky, you need veterans, you need physicality. And I think that's where it starts, because I trust what he's going to do offensively in his basketball mind to really put it in place. And all these guys are going to flourish and thrive.
It puts you in a position where you go all in on fit. If you get yourself in a spot with Javon Small, Aiden Mahoney, Elijah Hawkins, Davon Smith, go down the list of the best lead guards in the portal. Put yourself in a spot where all it takes is a third, fourth, fifth follow-up conversation, maybe some NIL talks, whatever the extra details that they're looking for. You put yourself in that baseline conversation of, we are a finalist. We are one of the guys that they want to, that we are a realistic option for them. They want to be a part of this. We can now handpick, do we want the best facilitator in college basketball? Do we want a pure shooter and just say, all right, well, if we're going to have some, not as many, floor guys capable of stretching the floor in the front court, maybe we go all in at the lead guard spot from a shooting perspective. You can now pick your poison of what Mark Pope, what that vision looks like, by putting yourself in position with the 5 or 6 best point guards. I think that's what they've done. I think that they are in position to go for the kill with 5 point guards. And now they're kind of hitting, now that you have 3 really high, 4 with Mark Fox, but 4 high level basketball minds from, in terms of assistants to go with Mark Pope to help kind of make some of those decisions of what that looks like, what the vision looks like. You can get some pretty quick movement there. And I think that's going to be the next step after midway through next week. I think we're going to land on a lead guard here in the coming days. knowing what you know about Pope's offense, Sean, what do you think the path is going to be? Maybe not just a specific name, but what is an ideal point guard in Mark Pope's offense with some of these other guys that they're recruiting, who they've already signed, Amari Williams, et cetera?
Yeah, and that's the thing is I don't really know. I don't want to really throw in a specific name out there, but I think with the way that they like to play, and the thing that stands out, not just about the point guard spot, about the way Pope likes to play offensively, it's the way the bigs can pass. And that was a talking point that you and I had about this previous roster, is the way Trey Mitchell could see the floor and space it. Z could see the floor and space it. You're going to see some similar things there. The way that he played at BYU and the way that Amari Williams and these guys are going to play there too. So I lean more so on shot makers for this offense. Guys that can stretch the floor and space it, pass it, but shoot it. You have great passing across the roster for what he done at BYU. You had great shooting. That style of play, I think they're going to lean into it, and I think that's what they're going to identify and key in on and look for, especially in year one, where in the past here at Kentucky, we've leaned a lot on athleticism and explosiveness at that position. I think it's not as much a floor general to kind of anchor it and do some things there, but more so of a guy that can shoot it, space it, pass the basketball, and kind of play within what they want to do offensively. But the five-man being able to see the floor and have that vision, the way that they run a lot of zoom and some things like that offensively, and playing five out and in that spacing and things and back cuts, like that to me is, it's going to be 1 through 5. That's going to be a skill set that you're going to see from a point guard all the way down to a five-man, is guys that can pass the basketball and see the floor. And that's what I think that they're going to kind of key in on here over the next couple of weeks. And then I don't know, like I said, I don't really know a name that I would have in mind that I just want to throw out there. But when it does hit, I think that those are the things that you're going to see when we break that game down, because it's going to be a stylistic fit for what they've done.
And again, the thing to keep in mind with the portal closing on May 1st, there is something to be said about, you don't want to say, this is our guy. This is, Javon Small is the answer. Like, yes, he's a really talented guard, and I would love for him to be a realistic option as your lead guard. But then what happens when a guy who gets a top 45 grade in the NBA draft says, man, I really think I'm a first round pick, but I'm at a mid-major plus. I need to go somewhere with a bigger platform to prove that I can do it at the higher level while winning a national championship. We won a regular season title in the CAA. That doesn't do a whole lot for me and my legacy and what I want to leave as a college basketball player. And Mark Pope's talking about prioritizing that and having guys that, value what that means. There's something to be said about a guy with a top 45 grade that wants to be maybe 28 in next year's draft class while winning a national championship at Kentucky. Like there are people that want that. Again, having conversations about people after the Alvin Brooks hire, that people want to be a part of this, that's a home run hire. And people like Jason Hart and they like Cody Feger's mind. Like, they have built a bang up staff where they're like, you know what? I want to make this phone call. I just want to see what this looks like. I want to, let's ramp up. Let's see what happens. So you don't want to, shove yourself in a corner and commit on a guy right now that you don't feel all in on, at least right now. Wait until that May 1st deadline, where it's barring a coaching change and, there's some deadlines that make it a couple days after that, but you have a pretty dang good sense by May 1st what your pool of talent looks like. Then push your chips in there. And that's next Wednesday. That's a week from today. By then you will potentially have Great Osibor committed. Then you maybe have Richie Saunders. What happens with, Kobe Brea? What happens with, whatever. Go down the list of the guys that are, maybe not the superstar of all superstars, Great being an exception because he's a star in the front court. But, kind of just get a better feel with some of those other complementary pieces. And go land a couple more of that, and then push all, May 2nd, push all of your chips in on the best point guard available, because you've already put yourself in position for a lot of them, and maybe a new one presents itself. So I really think Mark Pope is in a tremendous spot, Sean. I think that the way he has built out the staff, the way he has laid some early building blocks, again, that's what I tried stressing last week. Just because we're not getting tangible news and updates of Kentucky is a top 2 finalist. Think of how quickly the news shifted when Amari Williams cut his list down to 3. When it was Kentucky, Mississippi State, St. John's, you learned pretty quickly, okay, well, Mississippi State doesn't feel like it's a contender. They're not really in consideration. It's St. John's versus Kentucky. Then the news leaks on Saturday, early Sunday. St. John's is out. Process of elimination. Kentucky, like, it's easier to start doing that with guys, but when you just plant the seeds across the board of, okay, I think it was an interview with Ben Roberts of the Herald Leader. It's a great interview with Mark Pope, talking about the first phone call is so irrelevant to us and what we're doing. Like, we've contacted 100 guys. Yes, that's our job. We have to do that. It's the third and fourth phone calls that really make you know that, hey, you're our guy. We want you. You're our future. We want you to be a part of what we're doing here. That's the process we're in right now with Mark Pope. So the reason why we're not getting a run of 6 straight commitments is because the first run was just laying the foundation. Now it's about saying, okay, well, we like this guy a little bit more than this guy. Well, we like this guy way more than this one. So let's push all of our chips in on this guy. That's where we are right now. And as we said to start the show, with the staff built out, now you're going to expect news this next week. I think by the end of next week, as I said last week, I wasn't expecting anything tangible until we got to the start of this week. That happened. Now, as we get into next week, I think the news is going to really start ramping up Monday on of this roster getting to the 8, 9-ish level scholarship players. And then you go from there about, okay, now let's go for all in on complementary fit. Let's go for, we need a long-term depth piece. You can start kind of nitpicking from there, but the foundation will be set by, I think, at the end of next week.
Yeah, and when you look at, you were talking about fit, and to me, fit, we're going off of the way that they played at BYU. That's the only thing that we really have to go off of right now is, the stylistic point of view from an offensive standpoint. But the staff was priority number 1, but then you kind of go get that foundational piece to what you want to do, and you go get it in Amari Williams, and you get it immediately. Like, within a week of them being here on campus, you go get that guy. To me, like, just throwing out some names of guys that I think would fit a style of play the way Pope wants to play, to me is like Aiden Mahaney. When you look at the number of 3-point attempts that he got up at St. Mary's, like, overall field goal percentage, not great, but 3-point percentage was right there. But high volume numbers, I'm talking games where he took 12 threes or 10 threes or 13 threes. Now, you put him on a roster that we're expecting like the number of threes that Mark Pope and BYU took a year ago. You bring somebody like that to Lexington, probably don't take 12, 13 threes a game, but you still put a guy out there that can hit a high number, can space the floor. That's the type of fit that I'm looking at for what he's wanting to fill this roster out with. And that's a guy that when you just look at statistics only, he played a way that Mark Pope wants to play. And that's what I'm seeing as a kind of a reoccurring theme when I look across this transfer portal of the guys that they're targeting. But I'm going to keep coming back on this episode to just the physicality. And I like that that's what's been established, and it's starting to be established now. And then you kind of go get those guys that can throw up and shoot the ball from long range and hit a high number of threes and play that approach that you played at BYU, the taking threes in transition. Like, is this a team that's going to take more threes than twos in Lexington? I don't know. I want to see, because I still think they're going to have guys on the roster that you can post. And he did an excellent job offensively. What Mark Pope does so well is when you turn on the tape and you watch BYU games, they are so good at taking advantage of a mismatch. You take one thing away and they'll make you pay. They'll sit a guard the post they'll get a switch on a big on a small, and they'll post you. and those things. Like, you're going to see a basketball IQ on the offensive end that I think it's better than what it had been at Kentucky, and you're going to see them kind of take advantage of some situational things that we didn't see being done in the past. That's not a dig, and that's not anything at the previous staff. It's just I feel like Pope offensively takes advantage of situations and adapts and kind of adjusts better than what we saw in the past, especially on the offensive end of the floor. Getting a roster that fits and can do some things like that and have the versatility to do it, you're going to see some different things from Kentucky on that end of the floor.
I want to ask you, Sean, about just general mindset about filling scholarships. That was obviously such a polarizing topic with Kentucky fans under John Calipari. And, some years we got to 10, 11. I mean, 2, 3, 4 scholarships that went unused, at least one every single year at minimum, but typically in that 2 to 3 range. How do you think Pope is going to operate in that front? Do you think that it's important for him to go get long-term project pieces that aren't going to be an impact guy for a year or two, but you want to bet on long-term? Is this going to be a 13-man scholarship group with Pope, or is he a guy that's going to leave one open for a potential portal guy that opens up in January or whatever the case is? Cal kind of operated in that way. I kind of feel my early hunch is that he's going to be a guy that loads this thing up top to bottom. He's always been a deep coach in terms of, I want guys that with how much movement and the actions and the constant just go. I know it's a little too early with the goes, that hit a little too close to home with Cal, but the way they operate, all gas, no brakes constantly. You want 13 healthy sets of legs on your bench at all times to say, if we need some fresh, we need somebody that's going to give us something. 13 is going to give us a little bit more than 9 right now. Let's just take a shot on it because of the way we operate. He's a guy that he doesn't load up on 37-minute guys. He loads up on a lot of 20 to 25-ish minute range guys. And I think that's going to lead to some full rosters, top to bottom, 13-man scholarship rosters.
And that's the one note I'll tell you on Mahaney is he played a lot of minutes at St. Mary's. Like, I think it was even 40 minutes in the final game of the season for them. So average about 32, 33 minutes. I don't know how many guys Kentucky's going to have that gets to that number, just like you said, the way that they play. But to your question of, do they fill out a full roster? I think yes. And I think that the biggest reason, and to me, you shouldn't, in college basketball today, you shouldn't have open scholarships or multiple open scholarships. You should fill every single one of them in the transfer portal era. And here's why. You bring a guy in and it doesn't work, they can find another place in the portal, and you help them find that place. And then you kind of reassess your roster at the end of each season. You look at it and see if that's where you want to go, and I think they're going to key in on some guys that develop in this program. And that's what's going to be interesting. And the challenge to me is bringing in a new coaching staff. Are they going to be able to identify guys that want to be long-term developmental pieces? There were plenty of guys that came through this program in the last 15 years that should have spent 3 to 4 years here. But the goal was established a long time ago when Kentucky took 5 guys in the first round of the NBA draft, that it was get here and get out as quickly as possible. Sometimes the talent level didn't match that philosophy. Mm-hmm. But that kind of the standard was established that everybody felt like they were on the same track. So the thing to me with this is, you go get guys and you identify them, and hey, they're developmental guys, and you're giving them a chance to play at Kentucky, and they fit stylistically what you want to do and how you want to play. Then I think there's a path to guys staying 3 to 4 years in this program and maybe not playing in year 1. So I'm okay with that. Like, if each cycle we take a guy here that ends up being in this program long-term, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that that's a pretty solid approach. If you can get one guy that stays long-term and then a couple of guys that maybe stay 2 years, and then you blend it with transfer portal. I think that there's a successful method here that you can follow to kind of touch all areas of what you need your roster to look like. That wasn't the case the last 15 years. It was impossible to ever get away from that. Let's just face it. I know I'm not trying to rehash the Calipari era. Once it was established, you couldn't change it. There was nothing that they could do to really change it because everybody thought Kentucky was the fast track ticket to the NBA. Regardless of how good or bad you were, you thought coming to this program meant you were becoming an NBA player. Now you're kind of escaping that and you're changing the mindset of it. And I think that you can kind of see Kentucky basketball have a completely different reputation about itself while still producing NBA talent.
That's what I'm really excited for this spring and summer, to see what games Mark Pope is going to be sitting courtside for with the EYBL and the 3SSB. And is he going to go look at Under Armour guys? Is he going to, like, what shoe circuits, like what level of talent, and how is he going to evaluate this talent? You got guys that are going to, you brought in recruiters that know how to go get you high level 5 stars, but what does that evaluation look like? So that's going to be the exciting part for us. We're going down to Memphis this weekend for the first EYBL stop. It's not a live period, unfortunately, so we won't see with our own eyes and ears with who Mark Pope is looking at, but it's going to be interesting and really fascinating to see what these kids say about Kentucky. Like, what is when you go and talk to AJ Dybantsa, like, what is that kid going to say about Mark Pope in Kentucky and his interest in the program? And I'm really looking forward to those conversations and see, talking to, some families of high level recruits in the last couple of days. There's a little bit of impatience there of like, hey, why are we not getting phone calls? Why are we not, like, we were John Calipari's number one, and now we haven't heard from Mark Pope. Like, how does it work this way? And I think the messaging has, like, in return has been like, yeah, we have a whole roster to fill. We have a whole, like, foundation to set. Please give us, like, we have a whole spring and summer before we even have to worry about that. Just give us at least a couple weeks, and then we'll regroup. And I think some of those conversations have started to ramp up here, and even in the last couple hours, we're starting to get into the actual high school recruiting territory. But I'm really looking forward to being boots on the ground in Memphis, talking to parents, talking to, coaches and these kids themselves about what Kentucky basketball means to them without John Calipari on the sidelines. Like, is this the brand? You hear about the guys that want to play for Alvin Brooks and who have played for Jason Hart, and the excitement with Pope and Cody Feger. But what does that look like in a 5 star's eyes, talking to them and getting actual quotes from them and getting a feel with their parents and families and all that? So it's going to be really interesting. I will be reporting back this weekend. We'll be putting a bunch of stuff on the website and message board, and we'll do a couple shows, but I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing the aftermath of all that, Sean, just to see what the future of grassroots recruiting looks like under Mark Pope.
Well, yeah, and I'll be able to tell you firsthand if they show up to the Under Armour circuit, because I'm coaching on that one. so I'm on the Under Armour Rise circuit with 15U, so I'll be able to tell you if anybody's popping in the gym at any of these stops that I'll be coaching at. So I got that one covered. You have to tell me about the EYBL and Adidas. So no, it's exciting. It's exciting times because you're going to see, and we were used to seeing one new face popping up with a Kentucky pullover or something on, or a Kentucky quarter zip. But now it's all new faces popping up, and you're going to see them establish, a personality on the trail. You're going to see them network. You're going to see who they sit with, and just a different presence about it. And you're also going to look down and you're going to see Arkansas with, it's going to be weird the first time you see that staff walk in the gym the same time Kentucky walks in.
Buddy, did you see that video that Coach Cal put out today about rallying the troops for their NIL collective down there? My goodness, it's painful. Like, Cal, I love you, dude. I respect you. Thanks for the memories. I will always be a Coach Cal fan, but buddy, it looks like you are miserable. Everything that you do just looks so forced. I feel bad. I genuinely do, because I know that you do not want to be down there. And it's been so hilarious to me seeing Arkansas fans like just coping the way they have about like Jaden Quaintance not wanting to go to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm here to tell you that was the first conversation I had with Jaden's people about. I signed with Kentucky to play for John Calipari. Those two things went hand in hand. Like we we're going to send Jaden to Kentucky with John Calipari. I didn't sign up for Fayetteville with John Calipari. I signed up for Kentucky with John Calipari. And I think like it's been kind of a harsh reality for him, and seeing these fans go, oh, well, Jaden just wasn't a guy that we wanted. He, all of his demands were just way too much. And yeah, Cal just didn't want to deal with the personalities and the politics of all that. It's like, they built everything around Jaden. This 24 class was built around Jaden Quaintance, and now you're missing that. And these dumb Arkansas fans just continue to just be like, yeah, we didn't want him anyway. You didn't want the 16-year-old prodigy that's ranked consensus top 5 in his class that you get guaranteed for 2 years. You didn't want that guy? Okay, bud. It's like, I'm wondering when the realization will hit that this just isn't a long-term match, and John Calipari's miserable and never wanted to be in Fayetteville to begin with. And he's going to be out in a year or two and say, yeah, this is just not me. I wonder when that realization is going to kick in, because right now it's hilarious watching them cope and deal with the mental gymnastics of how this roster is going to be an absolute disaster in Fayetteville. Just mark my words. Arkansas is going to be a disaster this year.
I mean, it's I've got some media friends and stuff in Arkansas, and I've been on some of the radio shows there, over the years since I've been on the beat and covering Kentucky. And it's like a complete 180 when I sit there and kind of, look at things, and I'm like, wait, I don't have to follow what John Calipari's doing, but it's crazy to kind of look at it through a different angle. And they're talking about, get used to Arkansas fans, get to know so-and-so. Arkansas fans get to know this. And it's just so weird to kind of see how they're angling. And they're excited. And good for them. Like, they're excited about it. But I'm telling you.
It ain't gonna last long.
No, first, they'll see. They'll see what happens after a press conference in January when, like, everybody's here to watch us. You come to watch us lose tonight. Like, that's what everybody's going to say when he sits down at the podium at Kentucky at Rupp Arena for the first time. All you people are here to come see us lose tonight. Let's hope not. I hope it doesn't say that, because that means they won. So,
man, oh man, it's going to be
weird. It's still really weird, and it's going to continue to be weird. And I don't know if it'll ever not be weird. But can you imagine the ratings that it's going to get the first time John Calipari returns to Rupp Arena to play Kentucky?
I'm excited, man. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm excited too. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun all the way around, and I'm willing to bet that'll be the hottest ticket we've ever seen in Rupp Arena history.
And I had a conversation with a buddy of mine that it is going to be really hard, because I'm going to be rooting for Big Z. Like, I'm going to be, if DJ transfers there, I'm going to be rooting for DJ Wagner, because I'm not going to love a guy while he's here and then just hate him because he's no longer with the program. Like, Big Z will be a fan favorite forever. So it's going to be a really weird dynamic. I was arguing with Katie about this. It's like, I'm going to be watching a lot of Arkansas games and enjoy, like, go out of my way to enjoy it. I will. It was like, as a Patriots fan, when Brady went to the Bucs, I could not care less about whether or not the Buccaneers won games, but I was rooting for him individually, because he was, the guy I grew up rooting for, and that was my childhood. That was, my first love in football was the Patriots, and he was the leader of it. So obviously I was going to root for him. So it's going to be a really weird dynamic, because I will want John Calipari to succeed, because I love John Calipari. I will want his players and the guys, even, a Boogie Flan ends up down there. I love Boogie Flan. I will want him to be successful down there, because I got to know the people around him and know how he operates, followed his recruitment from start to finish. So if I feel like some level of investment into his story, of course I'm going to root for him at the next level, but I'm going to root for Arkansas to lose every game. It's going to be really weird personal dynamic of, I want Big Z to score 70 points tonight, but I want them to lose 70 to 120. It's going to be a really weird dynamic for me personally. I don't know how that's going to happen. I just know I will have Arkansas games on Wednesday night at 9:30 on ESPNU. I will be watching Arkansas games.
Yeah, their ratings are going to go up significantly because I think a lot of Kentucky fans and a lot of people will watch Arkansas just because of the transition for Cal. So it's going to be weird, but man, it's exciting too. Like I just think that it's good for everybody, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and I feel even stronger about that now. That seeing the things that we're seeing take place now in Lexington, just a breath of fresh air. It was needed, and like I said, that's no shot at the staff and the things that they did, but it was time, and I feel like we're at a point now where we got something new, we got something fresh. We're not familiar with it. A little uncomfortable, but starting to become more comfortable now that we're starting to see it fall into place and into order. So excited for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of days for sure. I'll be heading down to Memphis Friday morning, and we'll have a bunch of coverage, obviously, about just what recruiting looks like in the future of Kentucky basketball. It's going to be different, but before then, you can eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or vegan and veggie. Also discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. Get chef-prepared meals on the table in 2 minutes with Factor's ready-to-eat meals so you can get back to doing what you love this spring. Looking for gourmet meals? Try meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus. No fuss, no mess meals. Factor meals eliminate the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Simply heat and savor the good stuff. Factor is your solution for fast, premium meals without the need for cooking. And we are celebrating Earth Day all month long. Look for the Earth Month Eats badge on the menu for our lowest carbon footprint meals. Head to factormeals.com/KSR50 and use code KSR50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code KSR50 at factormeals.com/KSR50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. While we are at it, the Source Say podcast is also brought to you by Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he is here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, you can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net. Sean, this was a lot of fun. What do you want to see the next couple of days? What's the next big move for Mark Pope that will have you feeling more optimistic going into next week and beyond about what the future of this program looks like?
I think the easy answer is just a couple more pieces to the roster. Just by Monday or Tuesday, I think it'd be fantastic if we had a couple more names that were identified and in there. And I think that's probably the only thing, right? Like everything else, the boxes are checked. You've got your staff in place. Now it's about getting dudes. And so get a couple of dudes here. And then once you get a couple more, it's all the things that we mentioned a moment ago. Now you can kind of key in on style and fit and what you need as that portal deadline is beginning to quickly approach. So that's what I want. Get a couple more pieces, and then you can kind of look at what you need and how you want to put a contender together here.
I'd like to open the week with maybe one more guy. Let's get Richie Saunders committed. Let's see what happens with Mahaney and get a surprise maybe. And let's end next week with, what do you want to call it? 7 commitments total. Add four more guys from what we have right now by next Friday. I think that's kind of where I'm leaning. Get the core group, 7 main guys, and then fill from there. Get up to 10, 11, and then see if there's a guy later on this summer that's still looking for an option or whatever. I'll feel a lot better about that. But let's go into the weekend, maybe add one more, and then finish next week with 7, 8 guys I feel really confident about, and get your pick of the litter with the lead point guard spot, because that's obviously such an important role for Mark Pope and his offense. It's going to be a blast. We'll be heading down to Memphis on Friday. A lot of more coverage to follow, Sean. I'm looking forward to it. Where can fans find your work?
You can follow me at _Coach S. Smith. I believe that's correct.
Look at you. You're nailing it.
Hard to get used to that now, too.
You can find me on Twitter as well, at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Go subscribe to KSR Plus. Message board is popping right now. And subscribe here. If you're not, I don't know why you are not. We have a blast. Get to talk to our dummy selves every single week, and we have a lot of fun doing this, and we look forward to ramping that up as the offseason continues to pick up, and roster changing and recruiting and all that stuff. It's going to be a blast, so make sure you go and do that, and we will be back next time for the Jam Pack Sources Day podcast. We'll see you then.